It was interesting to hear from Robert Mueller in person instead of just hearing about his 400-page report.
Yes, all his time as special investigator, he never gave any media conferences. We never knew what he was getting up to until we started to see the indictments, the people who, as a result of the investigation, being accused of particular crimes. He himself has made no statement. He's made one statement a day for 9 minutes and says, I am now withdrawing from the process. The process is finished. I'm out of here. I'm going to return to private life. So you've got to make the most of your 9 minutes. Now, there'll be an attempt to get him to give evidence in the House of Representatives. But he himself has said, look, this is my evidence. I don't need to say anything more. It's all in the report.
Now, the calls are growing for an impeachment of the president. What's the likelihood of that happening?
I think at the moment, the impeachment, let me just explain what goes on here. The impeachment means that the president will stand trial in the Senate. The House of Representatives, now dominated by the Democrats, they will conduct the investigation. They will produce the evidence, which then enables the Senate, sitting as a jury, to hear all the evidence. And the Chief Justice of the United States will then hear the case. The mechanics of this are unbelievable because you've first of all got to get the House of Representatives to agree on all of this, and then you've got to move it to the next stage, which is the Senate, which requires a two-thirds majority. That will not take place. Now, if you look at the history of this process, we've had 3 impeachment processes, 2 impeachment trials, but 3 impeachment processes. They've all been different from one another. The first one, back in the 1860s, was an impeachment trial. The trial took place in the Senate, and Andrew Johnson escaped by 1 vote, but nonetheless escaped. Then you come up to the Nixon era and Watergate. Nixon actually resigned before the impeachment process got really underway in the Senate. So, in a sense, he did admit to committing crimes, grave crimes and misdemeanours. The next one, of course, is Bill Clinton and the Monica Lewinsky matter. And it's interesting that there are about a dozen senators still serving who voted in favour of the dismissal of Bill Clinton. So they were the ones who were talking about law and order. Are they still going to be talking about law and order in the context of Donald Trump? I doubt it. They are Republicans. The Clinton trial was very politically motivated. The result of it, by the way, is that Clinton, of course, escaped any punishment by the Senate. The vote was not in favour of the prosecution, was in favour of Clinton. And Clinton was assisted by this. He got a lot of public sympathy out of it. That's the reason why Nancy Pelosi, ages ago, said that Donald Trump was not worth impeaching. Her fear would be a rerun of what happened with Bill Clinton, and that Trump will become even more popular as a result of an impeachment process. So that's the Pelosi argument.
That is a theory, and some people say that President Trump would maybe welcome it in some ways because it could play to his base and work in his favour.
Absolutely. So that'll play to his base, but don't forget there are some Democrats who are hoping that it'll play to their base as well. If you look at the November 2016 election, you had a large number of people who didn't bother to vote, over 40%. So, in other words, you don't try to convince the Trump voters to change their vote in November of next year. What you want to do is to get to those people who didn't bother to vote. They were young, people of colour, often rural-based. They're the people you want to mobilise, as well as Democrats. Traditional Democrats, some Democrat voters could not bring themselves to vote for Clinton and would never vote for Trump. By continuing to ramp up the pressure on impeachment, you're energising your own base. So you're going to end up with 2 bases being energised by debate over impeachment.
That would make for a good election in 2020.
Oh, look, this is fantastic. If you think back, being purely cynical here, I'd have to say that Trump has been a great blessing for the media industry and for those of us who teach political science. We've got record enrolments now on American campuses. I teach at an American university. We have record enrolments in political science. Trump has made politics interesting. After all those boring, bland years, 8 years of Obama, we've now got colour and drama.
It's fascinating. Colour and drama we definitely do have. And now, Keith, I just want to go back to Robert Mueller's press conference that he held yesterday in the US. He just reiterated his report that he didn't clear President Trump of any crimes, but he also said charging him wasn't an option. Why wasn't charging him an option?
This is a technical point. The question is, can an American president be indicted for crimes? In other words, if you and I commit a crime, get indicted and we go off to a court. The argument has been for decades that you cannot indict a sitting president because if he or she has to keep on appearing in court in a criminal case, it'll take their mind off trying to run the country, which is why the impeachment process exists, because the impeachment is a political process and it's handled by the politicians. It's not a run-of-the-mill standard criminal procedure. So what the special investigator was saying is that it's not the role of the special investigator to set up the indictment of the president. Remember, a lot of other people are going to jail. You know, one of them is going to die in jail. He's received such a long prison sentence. He's going to die there. So a lot of other people have been indicted. But the view of the Office of Legal Affairs within the Department of Justice is that you can't indict a sitting president. Now, of course, once a president leaves office, then he or she no longer has that immunity and would then be subject, perhaps, to criminal procedures. I think that you tend to forget about your politicians. But that's the technical reason. He could not bring a charge against Trump. But he made it clear in his 9-minute statement that he did not clear the president of the second offence. Remember, the inquiry covered two issues. Was there Russian involvement in the 2016 election? Clearly there was. Was there collusion between Trump and Russian agents of some sort? And clearly there has been some collusion, because that's why a number of people have gone to jail. Not necessarily pinpointing Trump personally in this, but the second aspect of this is obstruction of justice. Remember, 2/3 of the world's lawyers live in the United States. Obstruction of justice means that you get a person who interferes with the legal process. Lawyers love to focus on obstruction of justice issues. That's what caused Richard Nixon the problem. He didn't instruct the burglary at Watergate, but he did obstruct the inquiry. As president, you are head of the legal system. You cannot obstruct justice. So the second aspect of the Mueller inquiry is, did Trump interfere in the proper legal process? He sacked the head of FBI, for example, he's asked other people to change their testimony, allegedly asked people to change their testimony. All of those constitute obstruction of justice. If an impeachment process goes ahead, it'll focus on these technical legal issues of what constitutes obstruction of justice. And that's the second side of the Mueller inquiry. And Trump has not been cleared of involvement in that obstruction of justice.
OK, so does that mean this isn't over? Obviously, there was a huge lead-up, lots of people wanting to get their hands on the report once it was handed down. We got the report. We've now heard from Robert Mueller. He's said, that's it, I've done my 9-minute statement, that's all, I'm leaving, I'm going home to my family, leave me alone. Are we going to be hearing more about it?
Well, Mueller himself may be subpoenaed to appear at an inquiry, but he says he doesn't want to be. But we will hear a lot more about Mueller, because quite suddenly you've got Democrats who think they can stir up their own base by continuing to focus on the Mueller report. And we haven't seen the full report yet. We saw a heavily redacted version. We haven't seen the full versions. Over 400 pages, and quite a bit of stuff has been deleted. So we need to get that full version and see what is revealed within that. So you certainly haven't heard the end of the Mueller inquiry.